Good evening, everyone. Welcome. For any of you who have not been here before, welcome to the National Opera Center. Feel free after this event is over to check in with the folks at the front desk and take a look around if you have not had the opportunity to enjoy all of our spaces here. It is always in our best interest here at Opera America to try and do things that help facilitate the field, not the least of which is thinking about what's good for artists of all types and flavors. And as the field becomes more and more competitive every day in terms of the pressures of where you have to go, what you have to do to be considered a viable performer, how you have to look, and everything else that you have to have in your toolbox, your health and wellness becomes that thing that often gets pushed to the side or the bottom of the pile. And we really wanted to put a focus on some of the fantastic experts that we actually have in the field that specifically help artists with the performance side of staying healthy, staying sane, and doing the best that you can do for your body so that it can do the best for you when you go on stage to perform. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you our fantastic panel of guests who have joined us for this evening's discussion. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Noa Kageyama, who's a performance psychologist that will be discussing mental aspects of all of this with us this evening. I would like to introduce Lori Schiff, who is an Alexander Technique practitioner and has been teaching Alexander Technique for, I can't even tell you how long, and making people always feel taller, better, and smarter. Dr. Claudia Friedlander is a personal trainer and a voice teacher and understands how those two worlds need to come together to help all of you the best way that they can. And Olivia Ward, mezzo-soprano, who is also the winner of the season 11 of NBC's The Biggest Loser, and actually got the word out there about how to be a fit opera singer and what's important to all of that. Megan Young, who has been with Opera America for many, many years, but is a fantastic yoga teacher and of all people has always understood about wellness and alignment and well-being, is here to moderate this discussion this evening. I'd like to welcome those folks who are watching us on our live stream and encourage you to send in any questions that you may have for the panel. As we get to the end of this, we will definitely then, I'll raise my hand if we get online questions, Megan. We'll
okay.
Pass them on to you.
Perfect.
So thank you all so much for being here and welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming out in this 14-degree weather. Can I just I'll do a show of hands here to see who we've got in the audience. Do we have, raise your hand if you're a singer. Lots of singers. Okay, raise your hand if you are a composer, librettist. Any? Coach, conductor, designer. Did I miss something? Pianist? All right, so we have a lot of singers and a couple shy people. So we have biographies for all the panelists in the program here, but I would like to just ask you very briefly how you got to what you do for your job right now, because I think you all have really interesting paths. So let's start with Olivia at the end. Just a little bit about you and how you got to this table here today.
Well, my journey to the table is very interesting and not very conventional, but I am honored to be here. I went to University of Alabama for undergrad, majored in voice performance, went to New England Conservatory for my 2 masters in opera performance and voice performance. After grad school, I spent 8 years supporting myself in the field of opera. I was very fortunate to have, I did lots of supporting roles, always the best friend, always, I was very successful in those type of roles, did lots of symphonic work, recital work. So I wasn't ever really, struggling for work, but I was never quite getting the work that I wanted. I wanted to play Carmen, but I was always the best friend type thing. At my biggest weight, I'd gotten up to about 280 pounds when I was finally to that point where I just knew something had to change for lots of reasons. Definitely for my career, but also just for myself personally. through a bunch of serendipitous events, I ended up getting cast on season 11 of The Biggest Loser. And was an amazing experience. I lost exactly 50% of my body weight. I lost 129 pounds on the show and have maintained that weight loss for 2 years now, and has completely changed my life. And in addition to continuing to sing, health and wellness has now become my passion. I feel like I have such a fire and passion for this type of panel and these discussions because it's just not being discussed very much, especially in this industry. And I think it's so important. And if this becomes kind of my stamp that I make now, I'm really excited to do that and excited to start these dialogues.
Thanks. Noah?
I started off as a 2.5-year-old Suzuki student playing the violin. Actually, at the age of 5, went to Japan and studied with Dr. Suzuki, and continued along like most violinists do from an early age: competitions, summer festivals, lessons, lots of driving. And then eventually found my way to Juilliard up the street a little bit for my master's, and took a class mostly to get out of theory and history and all those other things. I took a class with a non-musician. He was an Olympic sports psychologist. His name was Don Green, who many of you probably familiar with. I took his class and was surprised at how valuable a lot of what he had to share with us was, and how I couldn't believe that for 20 years nobody had ever shared this literature with me, which has always been there. It's been around for a number of decades. And so after the class, I realized I needed to learn more about it, and he somewhat, I think, jokingly said, well, go back to school and get your PhD in sports psychology. And I actually ended up doing that, and here I am now, some years later, doing this instead of the violin.
Pretty cool. Claudia?
I've been teaching voice for about 15 years. I always knew that I wanted to teach, so pretty much since the completion of my doctorate, that's what I've been doing. And I've also always been very enthusiastic about fitness, and movement and motor learning has always been a very important part of my approach to teaching vocal technique. When I started teaching, one of the things that started getting to me right away is that I noticed that I couldn't get my students to stand up straight and take a deep breath just by asking them to. And I became very interested in those aspects of learning how to sing and building the instrument that could not quite be accomplished in the studio, and began to look for ways to accomplish that someplace else. I ended up becoming certified as a personal trainer, and I worked in gyms in New York City for about 2 years, up until about the point that my studio just got too busy for me to maintain that practice. It taught me a lot more than just how to use exercise to facilitate better alignment and breathing and stamina. It taught me a lot about motor learning, because when you're teaching singing, there are all these things that you can't see or even really feel, right? There are all these things we have to move on the inside that we just don't get much neural feedback from these muscles. So figuring out how to get somebody to do a biceps curl is a lot easier than getting them to, relax their cricoarytenoids or whatever it is you want to do. So I continue to be very interested in fitness and the way that it can supplement what we do in the studio. And I remain very enthusiastic about just really getting as deep a knowledge and understanding of anatomy and physiology, and incorporating that into how we understand and maintain our own instruments.
Excellent. Next, Lori.
Well, this is quite a crew. I mean, really amazed and glad to be here with everyone. Laura Lee alluded to my years of teaching. I've been teaching Alexander technique now, for 26 years. And of those 21 years, I've been in the Juilliard School, and about that at the Aspen Music Festival with a range of instrumentalists and many singers. That's a core part of what I do. My history of getting into Alexander is that I was a trumpet player in what I call my first life. And in that first life playing trumpet, I made it through music school at Northwestern, and then some freelance time in Chicago, where I was introduced to the Alexander technique. And then I was here at Manhattan School of Music as my master's in trumpet. I freelanced for a while, but while I was doing that, I was taking Alexander lessons. I got interested because I wanted to get better at trumpet. That I was a little bit tunnel vision, to say the least. So if it would help my playing, I would, explore it, whatever it might be, all kinds of health and fitness things. So the Alexander thing really worked. And when I first saw a demonstration of it, I didn't really understand what was going on. I saw a teacher work with some people playing instruments, and they somehow sounded better just before your eyes. It was astonishing. because the people were using their body just a little bit better. And so that I found it curious, and I took lessons. I didn't tell anyone, and my own playing got way better. I also got calmer. I had issues with performance anxiety that started to get diffused. I'm not saying it got perfect, but I sure had a new tool to deal with. And in terms of dealing with exercise and fitness issues, I also had a means to guide myself from the inside out through the Alexander technique. I got so interested I wanted to teach, and the short of it is I don't play trumpet at all anymore. I don't have to practice anymore. I don't have to carry it anymore. It's great, and just as happy as could be working in the music world as an Alexander teacher. So.
Excellent. Good. I have a pretty similar story. I went to school for voice and was actually using the Feldenkrais method to help with how my singing was going, and then through that got into yoga, and then got so into yoga that I wasn't so much into the singing anymore. So here I am here today, and I think it was because I'm so I'm interested in how the inner world affects the outer world and vice versa, and the relationship, what's going on with the subtle body versus the gross body, I guess you would say, the physical stuff that's going on. So let's dig right into it. I loved what you've both said so far about how we use our bodies and how we could be using our bodies more efficiently through the Alexander technique, through training. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the Alexander technique addresses maybe the patterns that we develop, the habits that we develop? How's that for a broad question?
Yeah, I'm spending a lifetime trying to figure it out. How many people here have had Alexander lessons ever? Just so I can speak and you'll understand. How do we address that? F.M. Alexander, who figured out this technique, talked an awful lot about and wrote about. He said all human behavior is reaction to stimuli from without or within. So we walk outside right now and it's freezing cold. And how do you react? You stiffen up. There's nothing right or wrong about that. It's just a reaction. That's an external one. It's typical. You might have an internal reaction to, let me bring you back to a moment where you lost your cell phone. And all of a sudden, or you weren't sure what you did with it, and all of a sudden you're kind of like this. So you get flustered internally, but things are happening. So you're starting to tighten and all this kind of stuff. You're reacting to stimuli. You can learn to recognize these reactions, whether it's those simple ones I mentioned or something more complicated, like in the course of singing the aria, you get to the part that's just sitting right in your passaggio for a really long time, and you're uncomfortable in your whole body. You can start to gauge through your kinesthetic system these reactions, and you learn to prevent them. It's very, very mental, more than anything else. Alexander called it psychophysical. So you learn to recognize when you're stiffening, tightening, tensing, whatever you want to call it, and you learn to stop that reaction, and then as you go on, you can redirect it so that you get more what you want. It's a little bit hard to speak about it when I can't actually use my hands to guide people, because we do the work with hands to help people understand what's going on. But since many of you have had the work, hopefully that makes sense. But you're learning to gauge and pay attention to how you react, whatever you're doing. It might be lifting a weight in a gym. You're approaching the weight and it's a little heavy and you do a little extra. But if you just pay attention to yourself and you go a little bit slower, you can start to gauge all of the reactions that aren't necessarily your example of bicep curl. It might be you're doing the bicep curl, but you're stiffening somewhere else. And you can prevent that, and this will become more efficient. So you widen your awareness of yourself, gauge your reactions, and choose the ones you want so that you can get what you want.
Noah, how does your work relate or not relate to what Lori's just talked about in how we react to things?
Well, react under pressure in several specific ways. I mean, there's an emotional reaction, there's the physical reaction, and then there's the mental reaction. And each of those gets us in different ways. And a lot of times, by surprise, even though we know these things are going to happen, we just usually haven't taken the time to prepare for them in advance. I mean, a lot of times we're not even sure what we're supposed to be thinking about as we're singing, or 20 seconds before we're about to launch into whatever it is that we're about to do. But preparing in advance for these things, various exercises such as, there's one that was developed a few decades ago called centering, which is a very specific sequence of events or skills that you go through right before you start singing. Basketball players do this. You see them at the free throw line. They bounce the ball a certain number of times, a certain way. They might do different things, different gestures, but all of it's oriented towards making sure they're physically loose. They're physically not relaxed so much as their key important muscles are not overly tight and tense and going to prevent them from doing what they need to do. And then making sure you're not thinking about too much of the mechanics that are involved in executing what you're about to do. As soon as we start thinking about the mechanics, it interrupts the automaticity of all the things that we've worked on in the practice room.
What's that word you just said?
Automaticity?
Yes, explain it.
Yes. Well, it's a little bit like if I could have somebody walk across the room, you would walk across the room because we all walk every day. But then, if I asked that same person to walk back across the room, but pay very close attention to what your arms are doing and how much your arms are moving relative to your legs and what your hands and your fingers and your elbows are doing, as soon as you start paying attention to things that are normally out of your awareness, everything slows down. Usually you move even less because you're somewhat self-conscious and not quite sure what you normally do. The same thing happens right before you start singing if you start thinking too much about the mechanics. And this is something that is true not just of athletes but of all musicians as well, because what we do is physical and requires coordination and timing.
So there's an actual routine that you would suggest to put together before a performance is going to happen.
Right, and
Yeah.
that's something that we practice way in advance so that when the moment comes, we don't have to think about that either. Because the problem is if we start thinking about that, then again it interrupts the automaticity of that. So.
Automaticity. Everybody write that down. Automaticity. Okay, so let's talk about routines on a grander scale. So probably we all don't have 100% perfect health and wellness routines that are going on in our lives right now. I see nods around the room. It's just the way it is. There are so many factors that get in the way of our perfect lives, right? So, Olivia, you've had a life change where I think you've come to find a routine that really works for you. And can you tell us a little bit about how you made that change from the patterns that you were used to going through to having this new lifestyle? What's going on there?
I think, for a long time, as far as health and wellness goes, I just functioned under crisis mode. So it was like, oh gosh, I've got this coming, or I've got to roll. I need to lose 15 pounds. I'm gonna just go to the gym, and so it never was a lifestyle. I think that was the biggest thing for me. And one thing that I really did learn when I was at The Biggest Loser, amidst being beat down between half an inch of my life pretty much every day, it was the fact that there are certain things now that are non-negotiables for me. And one thing is exercise. For me, I like to exercise 5 to 6 days a week, and I plan it out just like I would plan a voice lesson or a coaching. I find that if I just say, oh, well, I'm going to work out 5 or 6 days, for me, that doesn't quite work out, because it's the one thing that gets put on the back burner. So whether it's planning out different classes, or from this time to this time I'm gonna go outside and run, or whatever it is, it becomes a part of my day that is not just haphazard, if that makes any sense. So by doing that and really saying this is just as important as, like I said, a voice lesson or a coaching or a rehearsal, I find that it's much easier for me to stick to, because it's something that I've already planned out in my day.
What happens then if you're on the road, if you're doing a lot of traveling, you're singing in a city that you don't live in? How does that affect everything then? Are you still able to have that same routine?
It's interesting. I travel now about half of the month. So I'm gone and I'm in hotels all the time. And I think it definitely still has to be non-negotiable, whether it's a time or you go to a different city and you do, classes. There are definite things you can do. I'm a big believer in body weight, working out with your own body weight. I mean, it's amazing what sit-ups, push-ups, burpees, and a jump rope will do. I can tell you, I have had some of the most amazing workouts in a hotel room. And now, I mean, there's every kind of DVD out there that you can possibly imagine, from yoga to, you know, P90x and Sane. There's a million different ones. And I mean, everybody travels with a computer. Most hotels now even have DVD players you can check out. So I find that it really can be very user-friendly if you're just willing to have a little bit of preparedness. And like, you know, I never travel anymore without a jump rope. Or I even have this really cool thing called a cross-core 180 that I can throw over the door of a closet that turns into like a TRX machine. It weighs 5 pounds. I throw it in my suitcase. I take it with me everywhere. So I think if you still do have that idea that it is a non-negotiable for you and it's part of your lifestyle, that you can really make anything work, especially on the road.
Do you still have days when you don't want to do it?
Every day. Every day. I want to eat cupcakes and sit on the couch. I'm not going to lie. That is never going to change. But that's okay. And I think that's normal. And I think I would be fooling everybody if I said differently.
Good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So Claudia, let's talk specifics about the routine, and especially since we have so many singers in the room today, can you talk a little bit about what sort of routine you'd recommend that complements vocal technique?
Sure. Well, in terms of routine, our bodies are always changing, our voices are always changing. The way that you're going to practice one day is going to be different from the way you're going to practice the next day. And so within the things that I'm going to share with you, I don't expect you to go and do all of these things every single time you go to the gym. What's important is that you keep track of what you're doing and just make sure that you are going to really focus very clearly on what your goal is for your fitness for the day. If you've got 15 minutes, if you've got 2 hours, however much time it is, what you're going to accomplish, and then keep track of the things that you're going to need to do on other days. The specific things that I recommend that you focus on if you want to incorporate fitness into what it is that you do to train your voice are the things that you really can't accomplish very well in the studio. Specifically, your alignment is something that you can think a lot about, and you can have the help of wonderful Alexander teachers like Lori Schiff and massage therapists. But if you really want to feel like you've got good dynamic alignment, you're going to need to bring all the joints and muscles in your body into good balance. We tend to all develop certain distortions if you're sitting around all day. Then sometimes some of the muscles in the front of your legs are going to get shortened, or the ones in the back are going to get lengthened and weakened. And the only way to really develop good alignment is to do whole body moves, things that are going to challenge and stretch the big joints all at once. There are a lot of things that you can do at the gym or in a class. I recommend compound movements, again, just sort of sitting here and talking to you about this, it's difficult to describe, but anything where you are going to involve your knees, your hips, and your shoulders, and your elbows all at once. And as Olivia was saying, ideally also having to lift and lower your own body weight. Doing a pull-up, for example, pulling yourself up and lowering yourself, that's going to use most of the joints of your upper body, and you're going to be lifting something that you need to be able to lift. Doing a push-up is another example of a compound joint full body movement. So strength training movements like that. Yoga is a wonderful practice for singers. It works on everything, and because I'm by nature, I find lifting weights really fun, and I find stretching not so much fun, that it took me a while to really dedicate myself to a yoga practice, and I love it so much. You can get so much done. It really is a good strength training workout as well as a flexibility workout, and it gives you time to really just sort of tune in and get in touch with your breath. It's a good mental workout. Because the kinds of things that we do in the practice room, you have to really try not to judge your sound, right? When you're trying to accomplish something in the practice room, you're trying to train certain movements and coordination, and the voice that's going, that sucked. You need to like sort of tune that out. And yoga is fantastic for that, because you're going to be noticing all these thoughts that you may be having about the way your body feels, about what you can do, about what you can't do, but the practice is so focused that you can't help but keep most of your attention on the movement that you're executing instead of this little dialogue that's going on in your head. So it's really excellent mental and spiritual training as well.
I'm really glad you said that. I know I'm the moderator, but I'll chime in just a very little bit.
You can send me a check later.
Okay, I'll do that. So the reason that I got into yoga was to get a workout from it, and it does a really wonderful job at strength training, at flexibility, and to help you with balance, which also it helps balance the way your muscles work together as well. But what I've found after doing this practice for so long is that it does, the focus that's there is absolutely the most important part to it, in my opinion, because it gets rid of all that self-doubt and that sort of hate speak that can happen in your head. You sort of get to this place where there's nothing there, and it's really wonderful. So I've dealt a lot with sort of self-doubt and negative self-talk that goes on, and to have a yoga practice, a daily yoga practice for me, gets rid of all of that. It's not forever. It comes back every once in a while, a day. But to be able to tune into that and to be able to focus in such a way that you can just let it all go for a little while is a really, really useful tool for me. So if you haven't tried it out, I encourage you to try it out. So
Can I just say a couple of things just in terms of
yeah,
routine?
totally.
So any full body movement that's going to help you with your alignment is really good. Working on your cardiovascular fitness is very, very important. What you need to be able to do is just get to the point where you consume oxygen more efficiently. Anybody know what interval training is? You guys know this? That's the best kind of cardio work you can do for your voice. Anything where you're going to really tax your heart a lot and then let it cool down. Tax it, cool down. You don't have to do it for a long time. You can just do 30-second, 60-second intervals. And it's challenging because it's unpleasant for your body to feel like you're out of breath. But even just doing a little bit of this, 10 minutes, a few times a week, and you're going to see some improvements in the way that you consume oxygen, which means you're going to be able to have more stamina to get through large rolls and to get through long phrases. So those are the two main things that I would focus on in your routine, working on full body movements that are going to train flexibility and alignment, and just anything that's going to improve your cardiovascular fitness.
Great. So we've talked a bit about strength training, and I want to bring up something briefly that has been said to me a number of times in the past. Oh, my teacher thinks that this is really not a good idea, and it's abdominal training or working out the abdominal muscles for the vocal mechanism. Can you talk at all to that? Should I not be doing crunches anymore?
As long as you're doing your crunches in balance with everything else, it's really good to have a strong core. So not just your crunches, but anything that's going to strengthen all of those postural muscles that hold you up. They're going to be fantastic, and they'll be great for your breath management. The problem with having very strong abdominal muscles is that if you tend to push on your voice with your abdominal muscles, having really strong abs is just going to make it possible for you to push that much harder.
So it's about balance.
It's about balance, and it's about being able to engage them or not at will.
Ah, that's a key point. So I think, and maybe this is something that gets addressed at Alexander, is having the capability of doing something but not necessarily doing it all the time. Being able to call upon those fine functions when you need them.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting way to consider. I think with the Alexander work, what you develop is a means to regulate how you're doing what you're doing. So if you choose to do whatever abdominal work and like the kinds of things Claudia is suggesting, you need to be very vigilant about how your whole body's reacting to what you're doing. So when a voice teacher and my colleagues at school sometimes advocate against certain types of exercise, I think we might all understand why they would say that, because what they really don't want is for you just to get all bound up. It's not that they don't want you healthy, just don't get bound up. Well, the question is, can you execute whatever exercise it is and prevent the wrong muscles from reacting? And so in Alexander, as you start to really refine your mind-body coordination in your kinesthetic sense, you can learn to prevent quite a bit of misuse. So if you're doing some form of I'll call it a crunch or abdominal exercise, and you think, yes, I'm really working my core, but you need to really pay attention that you're leaving your neck alone. That's actually more important than paying attention to your abdominals, because you can feel your abdominals pretty easily, but the neck loves to help, like it does in singing. It just loves to help. So if you want it not to, you need to really stay with that. You can do, in Alexander, too, some of my colleagues in that world are not terribly supportive of lots of exercise, or I think they've misinterpreted some of what Alexander had said. And I think really what it's all about, whether it's exercise or singing, because it's just another form of exercises in a sense, what it's all about is paying attention to how you do what you do. And constantly asking yourself, am I really reacting the way I think? Use a mirror, use video, get help. It's hard to tell. You know that. It's hard to tell how you sound. Use a recording device. But I think paying really mindful attention is actually what will make the difference on a lot of these things.
Great. Are there any questions so far? I should have asked a little earlier. None. All right. Oh, yes.
Yeah, when I try to start on a fitness routine, I usually get stymied somewhere around the first week or two. I was wondering if there were any ways around that.
I actually recently just read a study that I thought was really interesting, and it was actually talking about motivation. And the idea is that if you're trying to start a fitness routine and it's new to you, and you're like, I'm gonna get up every day at 7 a.m. and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna work out for 2 hours, and I'm doing it this time, I'm gonna do it. And by the time you get halfway through your week and you've maybe done it once or whatever, your brain literally tries to shield you from the disappointment of that. So what ends up happening is that, or so they said in the study, was that you just end up just not doing it, and you just kind of completely fall off the wagon. And a lot of that's because your brain is saying, oh, we're not really going to be able to do this, so we're just going to kind of move on to something else, So I thought it was really interesting, and I talk to people all the time about how if you are trying to start something that's going to be a lifestyle change for you, you can't just, decide to move the mountain in one day. That even if maybe you take 6 weeks and say, okay, over these next 6 weeks, I'm going to try to develop certain habits. And maybe just, the very first week, it's just about maybe getting, your diet in order. I'm just going to clean the junk out of my house this week. And that's what I'm going to accomplish this week. And maybe the next week, it's I'm going to try to incorporate some type of exercise. And the next week, you just keep adding onto it. And the next thing you know, if you've really stuck to these little changes, they end up adding up to a lifestyle. And I think that to me is so less overwhelming and so much more achievable for the long term. And I think that's really, really important. So just to try to pick a few things, that you can add and that will create a lifestyle for you.
Great. Noa, can you talk about this at all from a psychological standpoint of goal setting and maybe dealing with disappointment when you don't meet your goal?
There's 2 books actually you might enjoy reading. One is called The Power of Habit. The other one is called Kaizen, and it has a subtitle that I forget, but I could look it up for you if you needed it. The interesting thing is, it seems, as they're doing more research, that we have willpower in a finite amount. Meaning once we've kind of used up our willpower trying to avoid Cheetos and Pringles, there might not be a whole lot left to get us to go to the gym. And so
That's what it is.
This explains so much.
So being mindful of how much we have, and some of the studies they've done are brilliant and somewhat mean actually to the poor college students. But if we learn to create habits instead, when something's a habit, you don't have to think about it anymore. You don't make a decision about, am I going to run this morning or not? It's just part of what you do. You've already got your clothes out, and that's the other thing too. Usually we make it too hard for ourselves. We think, I need more willpower to get through and go to the gym and force myself to do all these squats. But instead, if you find a way to make it easier, so the lazy way out is going to be more effective in the long run. If I'm not doing it, it's maybe because I'm not making it easy enough. I have to find a way to make it easier so that I can keep doing it. And then with Kaizen, which is just another way of saying baby steps, for the first couple weeks, you may not even bother going to the gym. You just might wake up earlier, enough that you have time to go to the gym. And then after waking up for a couple weeks, you might just go get a coffee, at Starbucks, and then come back home. And then it might be, you get dressed for gym, you go to Starbucks, buy a coffee, hang out, and then come back.
You look the part.
And maybe a couple months later, then it's all right, I'm used to getting into my gym clothes and getting out the door, going to Starbucks. I might as well stop by the gym while I'm out anyway. And then you go to the gym, maybe you walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes, and then you go, get a smoothie and then go back home. But 6 months later, that's become such a routine, and then you're actually doing stuff at the gym, and it's not such a drastic change from one step to the next. And so the unfortunate thing is it requires some patience and understanding that it's not all going to happen overnight, which we usually want. And then so on January 2nd, we try to make everything happen. And then January 7th, we're not doing it anymore.
Right.
So,
Has anybody tried using like the buddy system also to have a person that you work with to help reach your goals?
I ran marathons for several years and had a running partner that, not for every single run, but probably 3 or 4 mornings a week, which when I knew that she was waiting in the park at 6:45, I'd better get there because it'd be kind of rude to not show up if they had gotten up or vice versa. So that it certainly can help if that, if you can find a way, but sometimes that's challenging and for so many reasons. But I would say about all of these things that when I exercise very regularly for years and years and years, and because I enjoy it and it feels good and I feel better when I do it. That's fundamental, and I think it's worth asking yourself what you want. It's the first motivational question. What do I want? Not what do you want to do. And when you get what you want, then you start to sense what goals will help get you what you want, and then your priorities start to fall into place. As you said, that I love the non-negotiable. So you know what you want, and maybe being healthier is going to help you get there, and maybe there's a fitness routine you're starting to develop, and you wake up in the morning and you don't want to do it. That's a lot of mornings actually will happen. Yeah. But what you want is so important and so much in your heart that you keep going for it. So I have to do this. Okay, I go. And it's not, I don't feel that it's necessarily such a chore. It'll get you there step by step, and some days you say, okay, I need a day off. It's okay. But know what you want, and then you'll know how to prioritize. It's clear.
Wonderful. So let's move on to the more performance aspect. So Olivia, let's start with you. How has your weight loss affected how you do your job as a singer? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, it's affected it in so many ways. From the actual instrument itself. I mean, it's so, and I think in my mind, for whatever reason, I always had this idea that, if I just lose a lot of weight, my voice is just gonna all fall apart. It's not gonna be the same, and I had all these fears about what that was gonna be like. But what has really in turn happened is, my voice has become so much stronger, and my stamina is so much stronger, obviously because my physical body is so much stronger. I think mentally it's been the biggest change for me. I really feel more comfortable in my skin. Therefore, when I put myself in front of people, I'm never in the back of my mind thinking, oh my gosh, do I look fat in this costume? Oh my gosh, is the costume gonna break when I bend over? Am I gonna be out of breath when I go from one side of the stage to the other? Those things were always kind of in the back of my head. As silly as that is, it was always there. And it's so lovely now to be able, to perform and be in front of people, and just to actually be in the moment and to be thinking about what I'm doing and how, I'm able to interact fully with the audience and really to be vulnerable in front of people. And that to me is the most worth it. And I'm so glad that I went through this experience. I do feel like, and this is a kind of a touchy subject, but people do look at me very differently now than they did before. Walking into a room to do auditions, the reaction that I get from people, it is different, and that is a part of what the business is. And so now it is very different. I don't have to be self-conscious about that aspect, which I'm very glad.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So Claudia, let's talk about that a little bit more. I on one of your blog posts, there's a phrase that I really liked about this subject. It's optimizing your instrument versus enhancing your brand, and how what we're talking about here today affects those two different camps and why they are two different camps.
I find it very difficult to talk to singers about the idea of incorporating fitness into what they're doing, because just over the last 10 years, now that we're having opera in HD in movie theaters everywhere, and there are the ubiquitous film cameras when you're on stage, And so people are much more concerned about what you look like, both close up and on camera, and it's affecting casting decisions. And a lot of singers react by like wanting the quick fix, like am I going to get hired because I worked so hard on my voice and I didn't think that it mattered what I looked like, but now I have to do this other thing, and how can I do it quickly? Not realizing that the idea of transforming their bodies so that they think that they can package themselves into what a casting director is going to want is going to have an impact on their voice. I've always felt that if you are attending to the physical needs of your instrument with a fitness routine, chances are you're going to probably end up with a physique that will be really great for whatever it is that you want to do as a singer. Will it be enough? I don't know. The important thing for me is that that's where you start. You think about what is going to be best for my voice, how can I really enhance my stamina, my alignment, my breathing, and just my overall sense of well-being using fitness as a tool, because you are your instrument. You have to build your instrument and learn how to play it at the same time if you're a singer. You can't just go and buy a trumpet or buy a clarinet, or if you're really lucky, get your hands on some kind of amazing Stradivarius violin. You are the instrument, and you've got your genetics, but then what you do with it is really up to you, and there's a lot that you can do. But you start talking to singers about this, and they just get very focused right away on like, how can I transform my appearance? And I just want to encourage people to consider these as separate ideas. That what you do to optimize your instrument is one thing, what you do to enhance your image is something else. There's no reason that you can't come up with a fitness routine that's going to address both of these things, but start with what's good for your instrument first. And I actually, if I could just ask Olivia, I talk to people a lot about whether losing weight is going to be good or bad for your instrument, because people ask me this. But would you be willing to just talk to us about how your instrument changed as you lost weight, and specifically what it did for your breathing?
The thing I noticed the most was when I was extremely overweight, I had this, and I didn't realize it at the time, and now, and as I've been through this experience, I really have noticed that you kind of have this natural pressurization of the breath, like just all of the pressure that's around all of your organs and your lungs, it's just this natural resistance that you have. I'm so thankful that during my weight loss, exercise and daily activity was such a big portion of how I lost the weight. It wasn't just, I was eating hardly nothing and I just lost weight that way, or some other different ways, because what it really did is it allowed me to really start to understand the breath in a very different way, that I all of a sudden was like, oh, I don't have all of this natural resistance anymore. I'm actually going to have to use all these intercostal muscles, and I'm going to have to really learn what true breath control is from, a muscular standpoint, really. So that was a very big learning process, and I'm very glad that as I was losing weight, I was really staying on top of that, because I believe, especially if you have a massive amount of weight to lose, I think that is the part that is affected the most in the voice, is the breathing. But really, really being vigilant about, the exercise, and really being conscious of not just, what I was doing, but what it was doing, or how my voice was reacting to that, I think was really important. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Are there more questions? Yes.
This is more about the staying sane portion, I myself lost a significant amount of weight many years ago. I'm very happy that I kept it off, but I also work with people who are losing weight, and I find that with singers, myself included, the issue of body dysmorphia comes in, and sometimes that leads to sort of a debauched kinesthetic idea. And I was just wondering if that's, if that's common with singers that you have worked with, how body dysmorphia comes in as well and affects the voice.
I've worked with people with that situation who've lost quite a bit of weight, and they simply don't feel the same. I can only imagine you would feel different, like radically different. And we react to how we feel. You do when you sing. You feel really good, you start reacting, you sing what you think is really well. So it's a slow process, and I think that the first thing is just to be conscious that that can happen, that your sense of yourself is so different. You probably can speak to it even better, but I think once you acknowledge that, it's all not starting over exactly, but paying attention to how you react. And even as Olivia was talking about the reactions breathing and how that felt, you're used to a certain set of circumstances when you take a breath and sing. And now that set of circumstances is literally different, but it feels different. And so then you react to a different feeling. So you have to kind of sort out sensation. And again, this is we deal with quite a lot of this in the Alexander world, but it requires a bit of patience and maybe just the simple understanding that that's a circumstance of this, so you don't go crazy.
More?
I have a question
Yes.
about food, because I think the general sense of food is very, the sense of what food is really distorted. So can anyone on the panel speak about how changing the way you eat affects all of this, and the sense of what food is? Because food is not Cheetos and Pringles, right?
Don't we all wish? No. I'll just briefly speak. That was a big shift for me, because food before for me was always just whatever I wanted, that instant gratification, whatever was there. I didn't ever think beyond whatever was in front of me. And I really did have a transition, as now I really view food as fuel. What is it going to do for me? If I eat Cheetos and Pringles, I'm not gonna feel great. From a singer standpoint, I'm probably gonna have terrible acid reflux and who knows what else. And it's just not gonna benefit me in any way. And I know that sounds, very kind of like a high and mighty thing to say, oh, food is fuel. But it really is true once you really start feeling the results of that, I should say. So for me is, again, I would much rather wake up in the morning and have the cupcakes than the egg whites. But I know that the egg whites are really gonna benefit me in so many ways. I'm gonna feel better. I'm, not gonna have the acid reflux at 8:30 in the morning or whatever. And I think that's a really important shift if you can make that mentally. I mean, it's really hard, I think.
How did you do it? How did you make the shift from, cupcakes are awesome to egg whites are awesome?
Totally. I think that, I remember at one point in the season, Jillian Michaels, one of the trainers on the show, said to me, and this is really dumbing it down, but in the beginning, it is just about making a habit. I didn't want to eat that in the beginning. I really didn't. But once I started feeling the results from that choice became easier and easier for me. And I still to this day, 2 years later, I still have to get up every morning and make that choice to eat these things that I know are going to benefit me. But it's so much of a habit in the way I eat now. I just don't eat the garbage as much anymore. I mean, I still do on occasion. I'm human and everybody should. But I think it is about just training that choice. It's just like a muscle, just like working out or vocalizing every day. You just have to make those choices become a habit.
Can I pick up on something?
Absolutely, go ahead.
There was something in that you said about you started to realize that if you chose the egg whites, you'd feel good. So from our perspective, you're built to feel good. So if you don't, something is going awry. Mm-hmm. And I think when you begin to explore something like your food habits and what you're eating, you might find that the cupcake leaves you actually with sugar highs and lows. You don't know that until you take that away. You take it away, and just if you start to look at it with curiosity, like, I wonder how it would feel if I did something else. If I made a different choice over at least a week or something, so that there was some consistency, you'll be able to actually feel what those things are. If you stick with the same habit, you can't feel any changes. But if you make a change, you'll start to feel it and go with what feels good. Then you go back to the cupcake, it doesn't feel so good.
It's very true.
It actually doesn't. You're kind of like, but I really liked it. It tasted good. But if you start to assess, but it feels good, it's not, then it's not a feat of willpower anymore. Mm-hmm. It's want. I want to feel good.
Yes.
Okay, my question goes kind of back to the exercise from the food thing. I'm borderline hypoglycemic, so I can eat whatever I want, and weight is not a problem. And
Congratulations.
It comes with a very awful price, which is horrible headaches and fatigue and all sorts of other different things. So, I've worked out the diet thing, but with exercise, I truly hate it. I mean, I love hiking, I love sailing, doing all these really fun random things, and I don't think of that as exercise. But the idea of going to a gym and being on a machine going nowhere for 45 minutes. I mean, there are no zombies chasing me. I'm not running. How do I find, for an everyday activity, how do I find something that is as fun as, I don't know how to find an activity that is exercise, but that is also not excruciatingly boring.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can get the zombies to chase you. There's a marathon event called Run for Your Life. And the zombies will chase you. Yeah. So, but I think what she brought up is a really important point. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to stick with it. I feel a little silly, like on the Cybex Arc Trainer. I feel like a hamster on a wheel, but I actually like it because I'm like looking at how many calories I'm burning and all this other stuff, and I think it's cool, and I'm listening to my music. But you like hiking and you like sailing. There's got to be some sort of daily thing that's going to do it for you that might just be more of an outdoorsy type thing. You might want to just go, power walking or hiking around the city, or not today. Well, you'll do it faster. It's great. I mean, it does.
Shivering burns more
Practical. It does count. I agree with what Lori said. I mean, do what makes you feel good, do what you enjoy, and find out what you want. And because it sounds like you've got lots of very active interests that will also count as exercise, but it depends on what your goal is for exercise and what are you trying to achieve.
There's also imagination. That's a good one to exercise your imagination muscle. I prefer to be outdoors doing things as well. And then I think, well, gosh, hiking. We live in Manhattan. So imagination says, okay, it's freezing cold out. I don't know about you, but I live in a building that has several stories, which means there's stairs. Now you can hike. It's not a lot of, beautiful view, but maybe you can get that in your head and say, I'm getting ready to hike, and here I go up and down and up and down.
It's still an adventure, though, because it's not something you've done before, probably. Right.
Well,
Turn it into an adventure. Yes.
I just want to suggest to that there are rock climbing gyms in the city. There's, I don't know where you live, but there's Brooklyn Boulder.
Okay.
And then for me, I had this long journey, and a friend of mine is a singer and trainer, and I hooked up with him. He trains CrossFit, and it's very you move everything, and it's never boring. So that's just something I would suggest.
I love CrossFit, by the way. Love it.
Yeah, it's never boring.
Thank you.
And it's
fantastic.
I think I like it as a singer because it's really hard, and it's this real sense of accomplishment that I think that we get as singers. So it kind of translates.
Yeah. Finding a yoga teacher that you really like. Any more questions? Yes.
I guess kind of building off of the conversation that we're having here, I've myself undergone pretty radical weight loss and change in fitness habits, and have found a shift in both palate and exercise or activity preferences of things that I definitely did not like 4 years ago, that I very much like now and need to do to maintain happiness, as well as foods that I did not like, actively avoided, versus foods that are healthier that I now really enjoy. But I was wondering if any of the panelists could comment, because I haven't found a way of articulating how to make that shift happen, or how that would occur, that your preferences do change, but how can we cultivate it instead?
Is it George Leonard's Mastery? Is he the one who talks about homeostasis? And change is hard. Can you explain to us why change is hard? We want to stay the same, even when it's bad for us.
And other people around us kind of conspire unknowingly and unwittingly to keep things the same. Mastery is actually a great book. Regardless, everyone should read it. It's one of my favorites. It's called Mastery by George Leonard. There's actually 2 books called Mastery, and are different, both good, but I recommend the George Leonard Mastery. And I forget what the question was initially. But, change is hard, yeah. There's some really depressing statistics out there. We have a better chance of quitting heroin cold turkey than we do of sticking with an exercise program beyond 6 months, for instance.
Wow.
And we make excuses about not having enough time, but then if you look at exercise adherence rates in prison where they have nothing but time, it's really no different than the rest of us. And so, I don't know if this answers your question exactly, but we really want to have to do it for its own sake almost. And so it might, again, going back to making it easy, the easiest things to do are the things that we want to do because we want to do them anyway. So I mean, if it's something like, Israeli, I don't even want to call it a martial arts, which is a combat system, Krav Maga is very intense, and it gives you the added benefit of knowing you can beat up people in addition to being more fit. So there's confidence that comes with that as well, and the rock climbing. I mean, all these things are, because technically, according to, I forget what governing body, exercise, going bowling counts as exercise, and most of us don't even do that once a week. So almost anything that you would do that gets you off the couch would be considered exercise, even gardening to some degree, not in Manhattan, I suppose. But and the other thing is to keep track. In terms of making change easier, if we keep track of how many stairs we could climb in X number of minutes, and then we try to beat that next time, because it's a little bit more motivating to then continue to try to beat our personal best. And then when we don't exercise and we see ourselves regressing, it kind of sucks, and it pains us because we put this investment of time, energy, and into it. We don't want to lose and backtrack once we've already started to see results happen. So in terms of making change happen, those are some ideas to try to increase the likelihood that change will continue.
I think you asked specifically about palate and taste and how that shifts. When I think that many people that work with this, and it's probably in nutrition books and stuff like that, but if you do consciously make some changes and cut excess sugars out of your diet, there are chemical interactions that are happening, and your palate will change. It's chemistry. And then you ask, well, how to articulate it, maybe to your friends or something. It takes time. And I don't know is that hard. It just takes time. So you have to constantly renew that decision. I'll have the egg whites today. I'll have the egg whites. And then over time, your chemistry and your whole desire does change. I've experienced it as well. And come to find out there's some flavors and things that you can actually taste because you're not having so many of the other ones. That they're not masking. It's this chemistry that happens. And I read a lot of information on extreme distance training. I don't do what others read about it, but beyond marathons, but triathlons and things like that. And if you read their information on nutrition and things like that, they're way advanced compared to the regular population. You may have come across this too, and you'll find those kinds of statements as well. So it's changing the chemistry within you over time, and so you will have different desires. It's very interesting.
My husband and I are working on re-educating our family and the way that we eat because one of our sons has a life-threatening anaphylactic allergy to about 16 and counting foods. So he can't be picky. If he's picky, he'll starve to death. So we are, and my husband and I are both extremely picky. I mean, there are very few foods we like. I mean, pizza, yes. Broccoli, no.
Right.
Papa John's right across the street.
Yeah, which we can't have because he's allergic to wheat and dairy. So there you go. So we are trying to train everyone in our family to like as many healthy foods as possible to give him the biggest possible menu on any given day. And one of the studies that I read in the way that the French educate their children is that palates have to be educated, just like you would learn how to read or do math. And the scientists over there have discovered that it takes 12 times for your palate to be introduced to a flavor or a texture for you to accept it as okay. So when a child or an adult eats something for the first time and says, oh, I don't like that, it's not because they objectively don't like it. It's because they haven't tasted it enough. Which goes back to you saying it takes time. You really are changing chemically how your body responds to things.
And
Great.
concomitant with fitness, when I was studying to be a trainer, a general rule of thumb that I was given was that your body is in shape to do what it was capable of doing 11 days ago, right? So the effort that you have to put in to get stronger, to get faster, to do all these changes that you're trying to evoke in your own body, there's going to be a certain kind of unpleasantness and resistance to it. But then 11 days from now, what you were capable of doing really well 11 days earlier will feel really, really easy. So I think just being mindful of that, being mindful of the fact that change is hard. If I don't like doing something when I'm trying to make a big change in either my voice or my body or my level of fitness, just reminding myself that that part of my brain's going to kick in and say, stay the same. I'm going to be like, I'm going to do this now. And then also to be nice to yourself and sometimes just do the easy, pleasant workout that you can do, that's fun, before just going and kicking your own butt again and thinking, okay, 11 days from now I'm not going to mind this, but then I'll be onto something else.
Good. I think we do have to wrap it up at this point, so I'm going to do a tiny little pop quiz at the end here. So I want to ask the panel, everybody in the audience is going to go home tonight. What's one thing that they can do, really briefly, that can set them on the path to reach the goals that they want to reach? Really just a simple little thing. Does anybody want to go first? I have one. I'll let you think and I'll talk real slow. There's a website called happyrambles.com where you go on it every day and you write down something you're thankful for. And then you can go back and look at it. It's really, really powerful. So it's happyrambles.com.
Oh, go ahead. This is kind of just a little thing I've been working on the past year. We've talked a little bit about motivation, and because people ask me all the time, how do you stay motivated? How do you stay motivated for long periods of time? And for me, I've kind of broken it down this way, that whatever motivates you for whatever goal you have, maybe it's a pair of pants, maybe it's a role you want, maybe it's whatever, view that as kindling for your fire. That's what gets the fire started. But you can't keep a fire going on kindling. So whatever you decide to do every day to get to that goal, those are like your logs. So every day for me, I try to eat right, I exercise, I practice this, that, and the other, and those are the logs. Just tend to your fire every day. And it's basic choices, small things to add, but that way you're not always restarting a fire with kindling it all the time, and not trying to stay motivated for a long-term journey based on a pair of pants or a roll or whatever you want. So tend your fire, get your logs every day, and you will get the goals that you want.
Wonderful. Anybody else want to chime in?
I'll piggyback on your comments a little bit. We're really good at remembering the negative reviews and the negative comments and the mistakes we make and the things that don't go so well. We're not so good at remembering the things that did go well, the things that are improving, the things that we really, really worked hard at. And so in the course of even a practice session, a rehearsal, a performance, if at the end of it all we can remember is what sucked, over time it's going to make it hard for us to build up confidence from week to week or month to month. So one thing that you can start doing as a habit, after every practice session, after every rehearsal, performance, coaching, etc., write down in a little notebook 3 things. One thing that went well, one thing that represents an improvement, something that you've been working on that went better than it normally does, and then one instance of great effort. So you really went for a high note without being afraid of it, or you really kept at it even if you were tired, or things that represent some deliberate effort on your part. Write those 3 things down after every one of those situations, and you'll find that it changes what you pay attention to even as you're in a practice session or performance or rehearsal, because at the end of it, you're going to have to write down 3 things that represent some positive moment. And so you're going to be constantly not just thinking about the things that sucked, but the things that actually went well as also. And so you'll have a more balanced appraisal at the end of a particular day or week of how you're doing and how things went.
I think this is also inspired by George Honeywood's book Mastery. I'm not sure if this is where I'm getting it from, but I invite you to change your concept of what practice means. Not practicing scales or practicing exercises, but just in terms of having a practice. What you do to become a more self-realized human being, a more expressive human being, a more self-aware human being, and a healthier human being. All of these things can comprise your practice, what you do in the gym, what you do in the practice room. Do it mindfully and do it knowing that it's going to expand what your experience of life is and your ability to express it to everybody else.
Well, this might tag into everything. Observe your choices. Whether it's your choice for breakfast or your choice of how you get to the subway from here, if you're taking the subway. Did you go this way or that way? Start to observe your choices and get curious about them. You start practicing in the day and you started with something. At some level, whatever it was you started with was a choice, your typical warm-up. And it was a habit, so you just did that. I've done the same warm-up every day for so long, but I'm choosing to do it. So observe your choices and get curious about, well, why am I doing that? Or is that really what I want? Maybe I'd rather start with this other thing. But at any level, your choice of movement. If you're on stage and you're working with directors, you work with movement choices all the time. So you just exercise that muscle a bit as broadly as you can. It'll be interesting.
Well, gosh. I'm so happy to have had this talk with you all today. It's really been a wonderful way to spend the last hour, and I hope everyone here feels that way too. We will continue the conversation over some healthy snacks in the back there. So let's give our panel a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Our panelists, all of you who are here, please join us for some healthy snacks and some wine so we can indulge a little. I did want to let you all know that this evening was streamed live and will be archived on the Opera America YouTube channel, so that if you want to go back, and we'll also try to pull all of the websites and the books that you all have referenced and just have a list that we can put up on the website as well for you to check out or pass on to friends, send the link, refer back to it. Thank you all so much for your participation. Wonderful, wonderful panel, all of you. Thank you for contributing to this discussion that's so important to the industry, and I hope we have you back to do more things. Great, thank you everyone.